if you look at what's happened in elections around the world, the game has changed. So for me, the intersection of, if you like, classic PR, social media, and the tools of marketing, that's a big transforming. And the way content is created on those platforms is very different from the way people engage. So I think that for me is, how do you create content on those platforms in a way that truly engages the audience, which I think has shifted.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Marketing Vanguard podcast. I'm Jenny Rooney with Adweek, and I'm thrilled today to be joined by John Rudaizky. He's the CMO of EY. John, welcome.
Hi, Jenny. Fantastic to see you. Ahead of Cannes, I think this might be close to the wire before Cannes.
We get some credit here, I hope, because as anybody knows, the week before Cannes is pretty intense. But actually, I'm happy that we're able to do this now, because otherwise, the ability to have focused conversation gets a little bit tough. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I know that we've known each other for a while, and I'm excited to have this conversation and just dive in so that our audience can learn about you and about EY and what you're doing there. And frankly, as global CMO, some of what you're seeing and hearing from your peers. I mean, at the end of the day, you're a CMO living, existing for a company that supports and serves CMOs. So there's a cool dynamic there for sure. But I'd love for you to start and tell everybody a little bit about you. To my knowledge, you came from the agency world, and now you're at EY. But bring us up to speed on your interesting career journey.
Sure. I don't know how far we want to go back, Jenny. To my market stall at university. I was thinking about my career. I think there's a common thread from my market stall, or redesigning a shop front of a car shop that I worked in as a student. I think somewhere along the line, my journey has always been about creativity and commerce, somewhere. And I found myself at Saatchi & Saatchi, which was probably the most phenomenal, education, inspiration around ideas. At the time we had this culture, ideas were everything, world-changing ideas. And in that infused with me a love of creating something new. And I think that was probably the most defining part of my career. First part of my defining career. Then I set up my own agency, where it feels sort of obvious now, but at the time it was an early foray into connecting advertising with PR and technology. It was a really early kind of exploration. And at the time, it was all about creating stories to talk about brands. And actually, if I time warp now, I think, we're seeing this kind of sea of everything is deeply connected. What was PR is social. You're making a story in social just as much you are earned, and so forth. So that I often describe as my mini MBA outside of the big world into my own agency. Then I ended up with JWT, did a deal there, and roll up to WPP, which was, again, just a phenomenal part of my career, where it was the early days of setting up the holding company model. So working for Sir Martin Sorrell, there are 5 of us now. Obviously, that holding model, that whole approach is kind of, but at the time it was new. And that gave me a real horizontal view of all marketing services. And so suddenly you're in with the major clients, architecting and integrating everything from insight to advertising and everything in between. Because I think, historically advertising was a bit snobby. Think about the English class word. There was a degree of snobbishness about that. And actually, if you time work today, ideas are right across the experience, and we can come back to that. Creativity is a far broader palette than I think it was in the early advertising kind of era. So that was WPP. And then I got this phone call from this organization, EY, which I really knew nothing about, if I'm honest with you.
And what year was that?
That was 2014. So I've been here 10 years, just over. And it was a mad one. I think, again, people thought I was a little bit mad. Why are you going to a consultancy? You time warp now, obviously, if you look where the market is, consultancies, including us, but others have been, very engaged in the creative industries. And I arrived, and they had just launched a new business ambition, which was called Vision 2020, which is to double the size of the business, which seemed crazy. It was $27 billion, 270,000 people. I look at it now, it's 51 billion and 400,000 people. And what I learned was, I've learned a number of things about being EY, but one is if you have a big business strategy with a big ambition and you know how to go about doing it, you can get there. Because it seemed like quite a stretch to say and double the size of the business in then 6 years, right? And I think the other thing, which I think is really relevant to most marketers today, is when I was going through the interview process with the CEO at the time, I was trying to show the logic of how brands drive growth as a revenue driver. In B2B, B2C, that it's a revenue driver. And he sort of halted me and he said, hang on a minute, inspire our people and the revenue follow. And to that day, this has been a sort of guiding part of the brand, which is particularly B2B, any people business, right? You're starting from the inside out. And I think that's guided a lot of the work that we do, which is how's it emotionally resonating with our people beyond what it's doing actually for our external audience. And I sort of wished I'd learned that. I think, in my early career with lots of consumer brands, you do all of this amazing work on the external face of the brand, but it's not always connected to the internal machine. So that's probably been the big flip on that. Yeah.
Because they brought you in and that role, did you help co-define that role to be that? Or was that something that he knew coming in that needed to happen?
It's an interesting question, Jenny. I often say, I'm not sure if they knew what they were getting or I knew what I was getting to.
Yeah, for sure.
They had been looking, I wasn't a natural fit. I hadn't done B2B. If I'm honest, I hadn't done B2B marketing as a vertical in that way. And what they did have is they decided that distinctive brand is a business strategy. And I think that's the thing. And the CEO, and to this day, our new CEO, brand is seen as part of the commercial strategy, not an add-on. And I always say to people throughout my careers, I've always known when the CEOs engage with the brand and the marketing, you get to great outcomes. And so that has been, so they knew what they wanted, but they didn't know how to get there. And so in many ways, I went back to sort of basic principles. And so I bumped into someone, I'd done a talk on this recently. He said, you know what, you helped me frame something up in my company, because what I went about is, brands need organizing ideas. EY is a multiple services organization. They launched this purpose, building a better working world. And I think I defined two things, which is one is what's a brand idea that can hang all of these services together as a benefit to customers. And then I think the other thing is advertising works, because I hadn't been an advertiser. And so I had to go out proving that advertising could help drive their business. And so those were the two strands to it, really. So, level one was creating what's become the Better Questions campaign. So I've created that, the better the question, the better the answer, the better the world works. And that's now part of the sort of DNA of our organization, which is ultimately what EY is brilliant at, is asking the questions that often clients haven't even thought about and solving them with our clients. And then the other thing was proving the value of advertising. And in some ways I had a fundraise internally to say, let's do it. And, people believed it and it worked. So, I think any, there are some marketing jobs that are well-defined probably going into it. But I think today no one quite knows what the marketing role is. They're so varied, as you know, right? Depending on what the task is, where the cycle of the business is it technology transformation, creative transformation? So it's a big spread.
Well, and there's so much, it's very meta, lowercase m, what you're talking about. You know what I mean? There's so many layers to what you've just explained. Coming in 2014, coming from the agency world, coming with the understanding and a passion for the power of advertising as part of the power of brand and driving business growth. Coming into a consultancy, frankly, where at the time, as you referenced, we've seen a lot of that happen, right? The consultancy race to the middle, where the consultancies are coming into the creative agency space and vice versa. We all know that that's been happening. There are a whole host of reasons for why that's happening, but you it's almost like, you and the company recognized what was happening in the world and the space that EY could play in a really relevant way for brand clients. But also it had to get its own story right in differentiating the brand. And were you the first CMO, by the way?
I was. There were various. There's a marketing. There were different ones. I was the first partner in the role and brand. I came in as brand leader. Brand leader. There was a partner role, which they hadn't done before. So my roles evolved. Originally was internal, external comms as well. So it's evolved over the years. I think the one thing which, as a former client described, a brand is what a brand does and says it does. And early on, we created a whole new brand survey, which became a metric, which is it's not just about the advertising and the external manifestation of the brand has played its role, and of course it's done that. But very much as a business, EY knows that what we deliver is the brand. So in some ways, it's been a symbiotic evolution of the brand. As we've expanded the business, we've expanded the brand. And I think that's something that a lot of people think brand is the pretty pictures department, right? And actually, it's the fabric of your organization. It's the total experience. And therefore, as a business level, I don't know if you know, we run one of the biggest entrepreneur programs around the world. It's called Entrepreneur of the Year. And it's like the who's who of organizations have been there. It's 25 years later. But what I found is EY, which you might not think, is probably one of the most entrepreneurial organizations I've ever worked in. Because if I look at the build out of services over the years I've been here, it's quite phenomenal. So it's a very strange thing. Of course, we're a big machine. We've got lots of, all the usual things that go into making a large organization work. But equally, it's very good at bringing on new services. When I started, digital was nowhere. We're now probably one of the leading AI players in the marketplace and professional services. So it's that level of brand building which is delivered by the service innovation, which I think goes hand in
100%.
hand.
And by the way, frankly, going back to the 90s, it was accounting and
Mhm.
it was accounting services
It was.
largely.
It was, yeah.
And as were many other companies in that
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
And then it moved into business consulting. And then
Yeah.
it feels like the marketing advertising space was yet another area that was expanded into.
It was. We've maybe taken our time in that we've just launched Studio Plus, which you would have seen. We've been buying up various companies around the world. We've got a slightly different play. We're not going into the advertising or the media space. We see fundamentally where we play is helping our clients relook at the experience. Because, that what's driven, as you know, Jenny, is the intersection around the customer is now driven by the experience and the way you actually connect with people. And so that's kind of where we come in at that end, and then link to the commercial. Because, in the end of the day, if you can build the most amazing experience, if it's not connected to your supply chain or it's not connected to other fundamentals of your business, it's not going to work. It's not going to help you grow. So I think where we look at is the front end experience, and then how does that link and make sure the back delivers the result. So, we talk about moving people, but also the market around it.
Are there examples of client work that you've done that you want to reference?
The challenge I always have is I can't talk about anything. I keep them being asked that. But, we worked in shipping to reorientate, how people experience in theme parks, in shopping centers. I don't know if you've seen one of the ads that we've done recently around transformation, where we're looking at healthcare and how you experience healthcare and electronics, the shopping experience. So it's sort of across the usual areas, but we don't tend to. I think the one advantage sort of traditional agency world has is they can talk publicly about all the things they do, whereas in the and you see it, right? Whereas a lot of the time we're slightly hidden. So we will keep trying to allow our clients. Some do, but it's just a frustration of mine. I often say the marketing job at EY would be a lot easier. We can just say this is what we've done. We've tried. We work with this country to re-engineer their economy. We can't say that through to it. So.
Yeah, but you're in Cannes next week,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Very
What do you
excited.
do there? Because that is such a festival of creativity, and it's all about awards. And are you able to
Yeah.
submit awards for the work
Well,
that you've done?
I mean, my day job, of course, Studio Plus is one of the many strands of our business, right? So we've just launched something called EY Parthenon, which is is a now a top 5 strategy company. So we have a broad spectrum. So my day job is obviously brand and marketing for the organization. So yes, we have some entries in. We've done some good films and content. I still love ads. I still would like to. We haven't quite tipped it. We did this
You can
film.
take the man out of the agency,
You
but you
can't.
can't take the.
I can't. I can't. I can't. I think the palette is different. We are doing. We not a. We don't show up in a big way. We with Goals House, which you probably know. We do a lot around the world with them at various convening moments, which is phenomenal. And actually, we've got something with Rankin. The photographer Rankin. I don't. Um, I went to his exhibition a few weeks ago called Fake, Faik, and it changed my perception around the opportunity for creativity, is what he's done. I think we're all sitting there and we're all a bit nervous about it. We're all wondering, what's going to happen. And of course, there will be a democratization of the average. But what someone so talented as Rankin has been able to do is do creative work that he wouldn't have done 6 months ago. And so he's just opened a new palette for himself on it. And he's produced this work that's incredible. So we're hosting a panel with, a few folks and him to talk about the upside of the AI conversation, because I know the downsides of it. I think, in a conversation I was having yesterday, that of course there's some real concerns. We have something called EY.ai. We built a platform. Clearly, there's things around the confidence of the data. There's lots of things in society that we're all human beings, right? We're all worried about the same things to do with AI. But actually, I think, and people like Rankin think, we're sitting on an age of unleashing a new level of creativity that none of us have thought about. And so that's kind of the theme and the discussion around what can we get excited about? And yes, we have to manage the threats of it.
As long as we're on the topic of AI, because you really just can't have a conversation without it. What is being talked about within your halls and walls? And, how are you thinking about it from a standpoint of how much are you as a company needing to be reactive versus how do you need to set agenda vis-a-vis AI? Specifically in your area as it relates to creativity and marketing work, but perhaps even more broadly.
Well, I mean, across our organization, it's fundamental to every aspect of our business. We're sort of both client zero on everything we do, and then advising our clients on the transformation. And so, in some ways, we look at it as how do you build confidence in AI from the depth of it, the data of it, and how you can apply it. There's what new value you can create and unlock as a business, and then what's the confidence in terms of society. Because that is it's always been an important part of EY. We're involved in regulation and helping make sure safe adoption and all the things that go around with it. So, overall, agentics, we've been doing huge amounts, and it will change a lot of the work that we do. In the sort of marketing side of it and the brand marketing side of it, we are looking at it. We have a sort of playground where people are kind of innovating. One of the team came up with a fantastic better questions engine. So rather than sitting scratching your head, we've got so I think we're looking at it, but like everyone, there's a map to get to the future. There are legal constraints, as about certain adoption of how to use it. So I think we're navigating it just like everyone else. But it will radically change. I think
I think it'll be interesting. You and I should do this interview 1 year from now because, I just think that's what just that much change I think can happen over the next 12 months. It'll be fascinating to see.
it is. I mean, what's exciting, one of the things I know I talked about the past, I suppose the last year at EY has been transformational as well. We had a new CEO, lady called Jana Trankali, come in and kind of reset the business for the next 5 years. And couple of things. One is, we called the new strategy All In, which is a real kind of refocus on how we can deliver for clients into the future. And so we've got this thing, because we're such a broad spectrum of services, we talk about Together All In, which is really about how we show up together. It goes back to Studio Plus. It's not just the front end, it's how you pull through all of the different services around a client. So Together All In is this kind of Nike attitude around actually to navigate to the future. Not one person can work alone. It's about the team that you bring around it to any different business problem. And then, we'd had this purpose line, building a better working world, which remains, but it was a look to say, actually, what's going on in the world right now? And we're all facing untold disruption. Okay. Everything, not just AI technology, you've got geopolitics going on. We're living in strange times. And so we created this new platform, Shape the Future with Confidence, which is all about the mindset that, there will be lots of challenges, but the organizations that shape the future rather than be shaped by it will thrive. And I think in some ways, it's whether it's AI or a new emerging technology, it's around a mindset that says, let's understand the questions, get the right team around us, and then we'll figure out how to shape it.
Yeah, you referenced this, and you're speaking to this now, but I mean, so much of your job is, especially with a company like an EY that is so multi-layered, has so many different divisions and multinational, there's that ability or that necessity for you to come in and actually have everybody telling us the same story, or at least feeling like they know. Listen, we've talked about internal marketing since the beginning of time, but for you especially, it feels like a tall order. And I would say very much a big part of your job. I mean, how much time are you spending on that versus spending time in client-facing work?
Um, Look,
And
I think,
also the external
yeah,
branding
yeah.
of the company.
We have a big team. We have a phenomenal team. I'm not day-to-day responsible for internal comms. We have a fantastic team. It's a
Yeah.
skill, right? I never appreciate it. It's a skill. We have fantastic things about it. It does help, as I said, having a CEO in Janet who believes in the distinctive nature of that brands can help with, and that they work from the inside out. So I think, again, I go back to my biggest advice to any marketer is make sure you're in an organization where the leadership believes in it. So, but yes, you start with the inside and then push things outside. It's not the other way around.
What do you think about the competition? I mean, obviously, I referenced the fact that other consultancies have kind of moved in this direction, and we've seen, obviously, having come from the agency side and now at the consultancy side, what new trends are you seeing in terms of, generally speaking, and you don't have to talk about your competitors directly, but just what's different now than it was perhaps 10 years ago when you joined in this space, in this competition for client dollars, quite frankly, in the marketing area. Lots going on the whole coast side right now. Like, there, you know what I mean? So, like, as all that goes on, is that advantageous for you? Is that challenging for you? Just some of the macros around the competitive set.
I've got two lenses on it because, we're all different. I think, I look at the marketing industry, the agency world as a buyer of those services, which we continue to do. So I'm in the market to buy because, like I said, we're not going down somewhere. We're not trying to do our own advertising and so forth. So I look at it and go, that is going to go through a metamorphosis based on AI that none of us quite know yet. I think personally, those that embrace it will thrive. It's a bit like historically when digital came in, it was the ones that feared it that didn't. And so I think there's a lot of innovation going on. And, if I think about social media, I've got my personal thing is social marketing is everything now. So actually, it's not just about AI. It's about who can actually show up using the tactics that our kids are growing up on over and above what we used to. So for me, it's, that innovation will have to happen, and we'll also let the agencies that are doing that. I think from our point of view, I think it's less about looking at other people's marketing dollars and more around how do we best serve our clients. And that's where we know there is a market for people who are looking at the experience, but integrate it in the boardroom. And so for us, when we're selling, I know we talk about CMOs it is definitely a wider aperture for us as an audience. But actually, when we tend to think of the buy, it will include the CMO, it will include the CTO, it'll include the other members of the board, and that's where we will play, is integrating it. I think, I mean, Jenny, you've interviewed lots of people, you've been around the business. Some CMOs are part of the board, some aren't. I think with technology and the customer experience, it's a team sport where you need the rest of the board enrolled. And that's really where, EY is coming from that place rather than the other way.
One last quick question on this AI thing.
Mm.
It's funny you mentioned the advent of digital, and you and I know, and this is
I
like,
don't know if we should talk about it, Jenny, because I shouldn't remember it. Otherwise, it ages you, if you remember the.
I know.
I've read it in a textbook.
But it's funny because I can't help but refer back. I mean, everything has a precedent. Everything, somebody once told me everything's derivative. Ultimately, you can agree or disagree, and there is something vastly different about AI. But actually, what I was thinking about when you mentioned digital is, that was the time when we saw like every agency under the sun creating, XYZ digital, ABC digital, like everybody created like their own. We're not seeing that with AI, which is interesting. We're not seeing like agencies or are we?
There are platforms emerging. There are people developing platforms within their agency. I don't think they are, because it's all encompassing. It's going to be the way you just do businesses.
Correct. And that's my
So,
point. It's very
yes,
different.
we built a platform, EY.ai. We know who the people are, and you need experts on it. But fundamentally, we're all going to have to become experts on it.
Yeah.
A lot of the culture change that I'm driving with the team at the moment is, I mean, I'm nagging my team every day. Have you put Copilot on? Because it comes up with ideas in the meeting. It's not a habit yet, right? I mean, I joke that ChatGPT is my best friend, and I tell my friends I don't need to go to them for counseling anymore because I could just have a far better conversation with it.
My husband does that too. It's very, he'll be in a car, we'll drive somewhere, and he just likes talking to the.
So, so I think there's a habitual thing, but where I think what will emerge is that people really understand how to adopt it properly. Someone had introduced me to this amazing guy who, after 2 hours, I sort of been joking with people, I could bluff my way as the CEO of a new energy company that I've just taken over, because the way he showed me how to use the data and the prompts was phenomenal. So we actually, on a lot of the work that we do around AI from a marketing point of view, we change the better the question to the better the prompt, because actually that's the magic. Is those that really understand the technology. And I think all of us have to spend time understanding it. Because otherwise, everyone can get replaced in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's talk more pointedly about Studio Plus, because this is actually an announcement that came out, I think, just last week.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Consolidated 37 acquisitions to offer a full suite marketing, design, sales, CX, and AI capability. Talk a little bit about that. What's the why behind it, and what's the overall goal?
Yeah, so over the last few years, it's in some ways it was often driven by client demand about extending. As I say, if you're working on the commercial aspect of a customer journey, you soon start to rub up again. What's the experience we're going to drive engagement with them? And so, over the last few years, we've bought various acquisitions. Doberman in Scandinavia, which is a design innovation company. Yellow in Italy, which is slightly more digital orientated. So we bought a range of them, some marketing services, and really, we've been discussing for some time about how to bring more of that capability in a scale way, because increasingly a lot of our clients are looking at this across the globe rather than individually in a country. And we have taken our time to think about what's the additive. No point copying anyone. What's the additive ingredient? And as I say, the additive ingredient for us is really that experience is the most critical area that will define a business. It's radically changing. Technology, but AI is a key driver of that, and really bring that advantage more holistically and globally, rather than having the fragments around it. There's a new leader behind that, a guy called Lawrence Buchanan, who I was lucky enough before joining EY to see something he'd written, and I thought that's a good enough reason to actually join EY, because having worked on digital transformations, I was quite impressed with what he had written. So, I think that's the simple genesis of it. Is, as I say, going back to the all-in strategy, if you focus from what can we do for our customers across the full spectrum of services. If you think about it, EY Parthenon, which is a blue color, by the way, just in terms of visual to help you see, is a sub-brand which we've expanded, which is a high-end strategy company. All the way through the services, from tax to supply chain to all the consulting, assurance. And then that front end customer, it allows us to go take clients on a transformation journey and bringing in the right people at different phases of that.
Are you engaging for those kinds of things? Are you engaging with the CMO on the client side, or is it the CEO, or is it a mix?
It's varied. I think, like I say, there's a lot of chief technology officers involved. There's chief innovation officers when you're thinking about innovation from a product point of view. So it is across the C-suite in that way.
Where do you as a CMO feel like you're needing to level up? When you wake up in the morning, what's the area, if you're being honest, that you feel like I really need to learn more? And let's say AI, let's leave that out of the answer set for
That's
a minute.
Unfair, Jenny, okay, but I'll leave it out.
And maybe the
that's fair
answer
enough.
is absolutely nothing.
No,
and this speaks to the transformation of the role and all the things. I mean,
when I was a student, I read a book called Romancing the Brand. I've never been able to find it, but it struck me that nothing stays static. So I think from a marketing point of view, nothing's static. I think for me, social media, social marketing is the play. If you look at what's happened in elections around the world, the game has changed. So for me, the intersection of, if you like, classic PR, social media, and the tools of marketing, that's a big transforming. And the way content is created on those platforms is very different from the way people engage. So I think that for me is, how do you create content on those platforms in a way that truly engages the audience, which I think has shifted. That's the thing that I worry about most of all. And I think probably like everyone, choice, okay, because there's so many choices in terms of connecting with customers. I think the one thing I'd say, and maybe it's related to AI, we do a lot of sort of client experiences. So we've just done the World Entrepreneur event. I think, one of the big enduring things, particularly in B2B, is human experience. And I think that's the thing which is probably going to override. It's not just the physical online experience. It's actually how you engage with humans. And I think for brands, they're all probably going to have to think about that human contact and how they do that in a way. And that's probably the thing that I think about more than anything, because brands are built through human connection. That's what makes them powerful in the end.
And everything's becoming machine created, machine driven. That's the irony. So
it is. We always say humans at the center. We've got this thought leadership, if you like, where with Oxford Side University, which is basically that transformations with humans, people at the center, are more successful. So you can't just apply technology. You've got to remember that these are humans. And I think, again, I know I stray into AI pretty rapidly, but in fact, it was something Rankin said to me yesterday. If the average is democratized, then you have to find new ways of being creative, because otherwise everyone's going to be served up the same stuff. So if you believe distinctivity matters, it's going to up all of our game rather than neutralize it. So maybe that's the thing to worry about, is how you're going to up your game creatively.
Up your game, seriously. And I mean, the next follow-on question was, what are you hearing from other CMOs that you're talking with in conversation with, whether clients or non-clients? What is scaring them the most? What's keeping them up at night? Where do you feel like you guys can help? Because there might be an opportunity there.
Look, I think it varies by industry. If
Sure.
you ask different CMOs, and that probably goes
Good
without
reminder.
saying. Because there are, it depends what growth cycle an industry is in as well, because it's harder. There's some that are harder than others at the moment, right?
And
Just
it's
based
such
on
a
the
good
cycle,
washout,
the
because
economical cycle.
I feel like
Yeah.
we try to get like one size fits all
And
things.
And it doesn't,
work.
which is, EY goes to market from an industry point of view for that, because it's different. I don't think it's anything that different from what it's always been, if I'm completely honest with you, which is, how do I harness the ways to connect with my customer in a distinctive way? And then what are the tools to help me maximize that? And so, in AI, is it a do less or do more strategy? So I think the enduring truth of brands about having a magical connection with people is probably what still occupies most CMOs. Now, of course, you've got to get the technology platforms around and you've got to understand where it's all going. But it still hasn't changed from the basic truth, which is, how do you inspire the audience to choose my brand over someone else's brand?
Last couple quick questions. With Marketing Vanguard, I always try to highlight an individual CMO's, that one decision they made, that one choice that they made that changed the trajectory, or that they look back on proudly, or they feel like really made a difference. And the reason I ask this question is because everything you're doing, everything a CMO does, it all comes down to those forks in the road that hit at every minute of every hour of every day. It's all about decisions. And especially for people who are aspiring to be, to be CMOs, can you just point to something recently, or, in the last 10 years that you've been at EY, that you feels like it's particularly poignant in your history there? Something you've done.
Yeah. I always say choose growth for yourself, right? So I think the one decision joining EY was, I knew I could keep growing and learning. So, and I think that's really important. It's probably the single thing is, at Saatchi, we had this thing, never content with the status quo. And so, probably in never being content, you push yourselves to keep growing. And so within that, I think probably my most important decision was joining, actually, because people thought I was a little bit, why are you doing that? But it's been extraordinary. And I think I've learned as much that I hope I've been able to give as much. Okay. So yes, I'm proud of creating better questions. The work we've just done, to launch I've got so many examples, launching Women Fast Forward, the social equity work that we've done. So I've been very privileged. It's a privileged place because you get to work on so many platforms, from a purpose platform to a commercial platform. But maybe my one advice was choose growth, and because then you put yourself into completely new situations. I remember years ago, someone said the key to your success is the person you don't yet know. And that's kind of true. I didn't know EY, and that's been a really profound part of my career, and so forth. If you go back to your life, meeting your husband you didn't know becomes a whole thing, right? So I think it's choosing growth, and therefore you'll find new things and be able to contribute.
I love that. And it's pushing out of comfort zones, because clearly that seems like something you've done with this role. There's so much more that we could discuss. Again, I look forward to talking with you again. I do hope to see you at Cannes and on the other side of Cannes, because it'll be interesting to see what sort of the headlines that bubble up, and what this Cannes will be known for. But the two last questions are, what's on the horizon for EY? What should we be paying attention to? What are you most excited about? And then I'll end with my last question.
I'm most excited about what we built and the energy around it. Actually, I think it's an organization that's it never stands still. I'm excited by the platform Shape the Future with Confidence. I'm excited by Together All In. I'm excited by the EY Parthenon launch. I'm excited by Studio Plus. So in many ways, it's about making it successful, and continuing to, like I said, the job of marketing brand is never done. So
You've had a
more to come.
score of innovations, so in your product offering, so it's exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Last quick question: who's next? Who's somebody that you admire?
I know you asked that. I know. I mean, maybe there's kind of three different people, depending on what, just top of mind. So, Rankin.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever interviewed him.
I wrote that down. Yeah.
He is phenomenal, and he's great to talk to about it. He knows the platforms. He knows everything. So he's got a few hacks, by the way, I think, which is quite useful, which he's taught me. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about his hacks on ChatGPT. Graham Fink. Have you ever come across Graham Fink? I know he's not a CMO, so it might not fit but he is, I call him the David Bowie of the creative industries. I first worked with him at Darchies, and he's just, I pulled him in the last few years to work with us on various things. He just did this film Generations, which has been successful. But he's one of the creative people that I look to, who every new innovation or technology's come, he's gone, how do I use it? So you should Google him. He's fascinating, and he's a real energizer. He's really good at talking about how to spark ideas. So he's great. And then the only one, who's maybe the CMO of CMOs, which I don't know if you've interviewed, David Weldon. Do you know David Weldon?
Oh, I know David. I haven't interviewed him for this, but that would be amazing.
He sat through my first graduate recruitment round. So I've known David in that role, and then he became my client when he was the CMO at Vodafone many years ago. But he chairs the WFA. He, because he's independent, he can probably talk a bit more freely about everything.
Yeah. I met him. I went there last year when they were in, I think it was Toronto.
Yes, no way, yeah.
And it was a great summit, and he was lovely. So
yeah, he is. He's really good. So I would, I don't know if you want too many Brits, Jenny, on your show, but those three I'd go with.
Great suggestions. Now, listen, John, I can ask you the soccer question. This soccer question has become that can be sort of like our little PS if you want to answer it. That's the one where I say, and that's equating your leadership style as a metaphor for how you play soccer, how you play the game, where you position yourself on the field, or I should say pitch. So if you were to consider yourself a player on a soccer team, are you the striker trying to just attack and score goals against the competition? Are you at the midfield line trying to be that connective tissue between the striker and the defensive players? Or are you back at the field protecting your goal at all costs from competitive onslaught?
I just was lucky enough to spend some time with Gary Neville, who was the captain of Manchester United. And I learned a lot of sporting metaphors, particularly about how the team equates to the boardroom, about who's the defender in terms of the CFO and so forth. But he was fascinating about the winning mindset that they go through. It's quite extraordinary. So I for the first time I've thought about sport. It's interesting. I think I try to play both. I think sometimes I'm the goal scorer, because I think sometimes I do believe that part of my strength is still to come up with ideas unless someone else has got one, right? So I believe in that. I believe you have to continue to be the spark. So sometimes I am, and then bring people with me, and equally sometimes in the coaching role. And so I think that it's probably, at that end where, and actually there's a distinction. Sometimes you go, I'm in directing role, and sometimes I'm in coaching mode. And I think you got to get the balance. I think any one of us struggles today. I don't think you can sit back and never strike any goals as a leader.
I love that. Well, John, with that, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a pleasure. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. Safe travels. And
thank you, Jenny. Nice to see you. I feel I've seen you at the start of this journey many years ago as well, when I first joined it. So it's a nice top and tail where we got
it. Absolutely is. Absolutely is. So, listen, this industry is nothing but great relationships, right?
100%. 100%.
So, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Marketing Vanguard, part of the Adweek Podcast Network and Acast Creator Network. You can listen and subscribe to all of Adweek's podcasts by visiting adweek.com/podcasts. Stay updated on all things Adweek Podcast Network by following us on Twitter at Adweek Podcasts. And if you have a question or suggestion for the show, send us an email at podcast@adweek.com. Thanks for listening.